Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Sodano, and who I have here with me today is Michigan State Senator Jonathan Lindsey. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Garrett, and good morning to the Grassroots Army out there.
So how'd you guys survive those storms over the past couple of days?
Storms were a little bit rough down here. I'm near Coldwater. We had multiple power outages. I'm running today, as I told you beforehand, off generator power and Starlink internet, but we're making it through.
Hey, you gave a little shout out to Starlink and Elon Musk. Already, this show is on the right path. I love it.
That's okay, right. Starlink is great.
It is, man. And it's all off topic right off the bat. It's amazing when you see that in the sky. I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, aliens, right? It's so amazing. It's so cool. I'm a sci-fi geek. I love science fiction. So anything to do with outer space, I'm all for. I wish I could sign up for Elon Musk Mars colony if I didn't have a family, that's for sure. But I want to get into some very hot topics, obviously, right now, especially after President Trump's press conference yesterday, him talking about the tariffs and what he says, the golden age of America, which the majority of Republicans were fired up every single day that we get up. We feel like it's Christmas. What's going on next? But there are some senators like Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins from Maine, and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska that have stood up against these tariffs. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, from a very high level perspective, what I would say is that the challenge in the Congress right now is that it is the job of the members there to support Trump's agenda. He won a massive victory for us as Republicans. And I think the most important thing right now is to empower him to pursue his agenda, especially in this critical early time, in these first 2 years before there's a midterm, really in these first 6 months. And so a lot of the consternation about tariffs, it's fine to have these conversations about, what's the impact on prices, et cetera, what's the free trade policy. But in the short term, I think that misses the point, which is that Trump came in with a mandate to lead. He is an incredible leader, and our Republicans, at least in the short term, they don't have to understand every component of what he's doing, but they should be rallying behind him and empowering him to lead us into that golden age.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because a lot of people are all emotional, short-sighted. There's no vision, especially in politics. It's all what can be hot in the media cycle today to get the most clicks and everything else. But, I'm looking for people and leaders and in leadership roles to have that vision. Hey, let's not look what's directly in front of us today. Let's talk about what's going to happen several years from now, a decade from now. And that's what I'm looking for. And I think the majority of Americans are starting to realize that, like, hey, yeah, this may hurt maybe in the short term, but the long-term gains of this, and the chart that he held up was unbelievable. I didn't even know that that's how much we were getting taken advantage of from all these other countries with the amount of tariffs that they are putting on us. And President Trump's like, hey, if you're going to do it to us, we're going to do it to you. And people have to understand, if you kind of look at politics, especially over the past 50 years, there's a lot of been, and you went through this, especially serving our great country, is there's always a war on something. The war on drugs, Nixon said it. And then after 9/11, the war on terror. So they always use these kind of things, but it never gets solved. And we finally have someone who actually is getting stuff done. I mean, I use the border. I mean, the statistics on the border is an open and shut case with me, with the amount of people, like 9,000 people per day during the Biden administration was coming over here. And Republicans now in Congress were willing to say, hey, it's okay if we get that 9,000 down to 5,000 a day. That can be the new normal. And I hate that word, new normal. And what happened underneath the right leadership? Trump came in, shut the border, and now the border crossings were, I think, 7,180 for the entire month. So that proves to you, with the right leadership, you can get things done, and you can not only get it done, but you can get it done fast.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll kind of even marry the two topics together, the tariffs and the border, right? One of the reasons that people have to be careful about pushing back on the tariff talk is that it's time and time again been used as an effective tool by the president to accomplish these strategic goals. So early on, the first round of announced tariffs against Canada, remember, the strategic goal there was to actually get the Canadian government to work with us on securing the border, where there were massive amounts of fentanyl coming over. And I think it took like 24 hours for the Canadian government to cave and say, okay, we're going to help out with that, you know.
Yeah.
So there are strategic goals that have to do with border control, but also with onshoring some of our, you know, critical industry that I think Trump has a vision for this. It's not just about going out there and you know, implementing tariffs willy-nilly, but it is about making America more competitive. The other thing I'd like to say quickly about tariffs is that the most beautiful thing about this whole situation is getting Democrats to understand some of the impact of pass-through costs. So you see them out there talking about how, well, if you put a tariff on something, the producer's not going to pay that extra money and they don't have enough profit margin. They're going to pass the cost along to the consumers. Well, congratulations to the Democrats for now realizing that's how taxes work, right? So, you know, what I would say is that what's fundamentally unfair is that we here in America are putting corporate taxes on the businesses that would produce these same goods. So if you have a, you know, a 25% corporate tax on a business in America that's producing something we need to buy, and you have a 0% tariff on a product that's coming from another country coming in, we're already at a disadvantage, and they should be talking about the same thing. Every time that we tax our businesses, that we tax economic activity here in the United States, that cost is passed along. So, you know, I wish they were more interested in protecting, you know, the US interest as much as they are in protecting those, you know, products flowing in from overseas.
Yeah, they've been proven time and time again that a lot of things that they do don't make a lot of common sense. That's for sure. And it's still mind-boggling after the turnout in the last election, and obviously President Trump winning not only the Electoral College but also the popular vote, that the Democrats, they doubled down on the radical left ideology with boys in women's restrooms and locker rooms, men competing in women's sports. It just goes on, and it seems like they're really willing to die on that hill. And I think if the Republicans message right, I mean, 2026 will be another red wave, I'm hoping. But we have one of your colleagues, I guess we'll call her that, Mallory McMorrow, that just announced her run for U.S. Senate yesterday. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, you just made a really good point about where the Democrats have an identity crisis. They're trying to figure out how much do they stick with the really radical components of their ideology that have defined the party for, you know, at least the last decade. And, you know, someone like Senator McMorrow is a pretty classic example of that in the Michigan Senate. I'm sure if she, you know, running for US Senate, she's going to say I'm a moderate, et cetera. But she's been out there on the leading edge of some of these really left-wing, progressive, radical ideas. Just the other day, we were in the, you want to talk about doubling down, we were in the Senate. We come to work, we could be working on legislation for the people of Michigan. Instead, the Democrat led Senate decides to bring a resolution reaffirming their commitment to DEI. And we're like, what are you guys doing? This is insane. So we call for a record roll call vote on it to say, okay, if you guys want to bring the resolution up, let's vote on it. And we did. And of course, people like Senator McMorrow voted yes. They're really committed right now. They're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting how that shapes up, because I think the majority of Americans are just fed up with this kind of woke ideology force fed not only our throats and where we work and where we go, but also to our children. That is for sure. So we have a lot going on, obviously, with President Trump signing a lot of executive orders, right? What is Congress doing right now? Because what I'm afraid of is we have all these great things happening. And if Congress doesn't sign these things into law, then it can come to a screeching halt if, unfortunately, we lose in the next presidential race. What do you think's going on?
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot. He's getting a lot done through the executive orders. It's been some incredible leadership on that front. But to your point, implementing it in law is more challenging. There's a very slim majority inside the House of Representatives right now. Obviously, not all the senators agree on all the agenda items, but even if they did, we don't have 60 senators, which for certain key votes can become necessary. So, they're trying to work as much as they can into one of the opportunities they have periodically through budget reconciliation to get as many of these policy objectives. That's why you hear Trump talk about one beautiful bill, getting the implementation of the tax cuts, the extension of the tax cuts. So it's a hard needle to thread right now, but they're trying to put as much as they can together in one piece to put the Trump agenda to an actual vote for Congress, where you don't have 60 votes in the Senate and you've got razor thin majorities in the House.
Yeah, and that brings us right to this next point that I wanted to talk about is obviously 2026. Michigan is obviously going to be very important for the first time in the history of our state. We not only have a U.S. Senate seat, but the governor's race is going to be available and up for the taking. And we have a lot of local races that are going on. We don't have the supermajority that we would want to continue with this freight train of this golden age of America, as President Trump likes to talk about. What do we need to do? Because this is not a presidential cycle. So we're not going to have Trump on the ballot. And obviously, we know with our past, a lot of Republicans just stay home. And what I'm concerned with right now is who's running, who's think of running. There's just not that candidate who's going to bring the energy that I feel that it's going to be needed to get people excited about these races. So what do we need to have happen over the next 2 years, Jonathan, with getting that activation and getting these people to turn out and vote? Because we just saw in Pennsylvania, Scott Presler talked about it. They just lost that Pennsylvania, I think, state seat by 400 and something votes, very slim. And obviously, they just lost the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. So one thing the Democrats are very good at is they're good at being very emotional, and they're very good at activating their grassroots support. What do we need to do to get that organization and that infrastructure in to activate what we need to have happen here in the state of Michigan in 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we could spend an hour talking about. But I'll say one key point is that we have to activate, and this is what I love about you. You followed through from your governor's race and kept engaged with the community and growing this grassroots movement. But we have to activate, I think maybe this is a phrase from you, is our most valuable asset, our people. And it is harder when Trump's not on the ballot or the big top of the ticket. But the reason it's harder is because if you go out there and talk to the Trump Republicans or just the disaffected base that got super motivated about the MAGA movement, they're looking for leaders with authenticity, people they can trust, people that bring something fresh, that are not, part of the political system that they feel like has been damaging them for years and years. Trump connected very well with a subset of people who otherwise aren't super politically engaged. It's very difficult for anybody else, arguably impossible, to totally recreate what Trump did. But what we as Republicans or conservatives, or I don't care what party you're part of out there, but if you're somebody, who's in Michigan who wants to have good people elected to office, you gotta you gotta think about it in terms of running people for office and then going out there and, to your point, activating the grassroots, getting people involved that are really going to connect. I think when you look at 2016 Trump's victory, 2024 Trump's victory here in Michigan, we saw a group of people come out, and some of these people, they would walk across broken glass to go vote for Trump. They really found something they believed in. And we've got to get in tune with that. We've got to be running people that are going to connect with people. And I think you do that. A lot of it comes down to truth, authenticity. Yeah, they want to know what you believe about certain policy positions, but I think more than that, they want to have a connection saying, if I elect this person, I believe that they're going to go there and they're going to tackle the problems in the system that has not been serving me.
100%. And just as a voter, right? That's what I want. I don't want your career politician. I'm just kind of fed up with it. I want someone who's going to be authentic. I want somebody who's going to be real, not part of the political system, one who's going to not only walk the walk, but talk the talk, right? Both of those. And that's what I think the majority of people are just craving. They desire it, but we need to get the right candidates, the right skill set. I bring that up all the time. I've learned a lot with my run for governor this last time. And I saw a lot of people that were in the race that probably shouldn't have been in the race, that kind of watered down the field. And I always want to make sure, and I kind of made a vow to myself and to my movement, that we were always going to call out both sides of the aisle, right? We are going to like hold people accountable and make sure that, hey, if you want to run for office, that's great. Be a part of the solution. That's fantastic. But look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what skill set am I really truly bringing? You've never been involved with politics, never owned your own business, is just a normal average day person, then maybe running for governor or U.S. Senate, maybe you shouldn't start there. Maybe work up. And I've been trying to really inspire people like, hey, run for city commission, run for county commission, or run for, school board, get some work in. And then one day you may have the goods that it's going to take to run a statewide race. And anyone that throws their hat in the ring, don't get me wrong, they get my utmost respect. It's a horrible, evil game. You know this. You're involved in it. The arena is tough. It's nasty. It's hard on our families. And so anyone that wants to throw their hat in the ring, they have my respect. But you really have to look in the mirror and say, do I have the skill set? Okay. And I'm hoping that a lot of people do that and just don't water down the field at all levels. But you were recognized, and I got to give you props for this because I've been following you. You and I were on the campaign trail together in my run and your run. But Mirrors recognized you as the most conservative voting record in Michigan. And I love what you said because you have quoted, and I quote you, I do my best to vote for liberty and against the behemoth of government. I love that. The behemoth of government. Go ahead.
Well, no, it was funny is that I didn't have much time to make that response. They gave me a text saying we just did our review. You've been named most conservative. We've got to go to press and write a story about this in like 15 minutes. Do you have a quote? And so I just said what I believe. I do. I vote for liberty. I believe that we are blessed in America. That the government created by our founders was unique of its time. It's something that no one had ever tried. The premise was that the government inherently has no power. We people give power to it. And we did it through the states, creating this effectively compact, this union. But it was totally backwards from the way government had worked for all of human history, where there was a premise that government starts with power over people's lives. We don't have that in America. We have liberty as the foundation. And then we work from there saying, what limited things do we believe collectively that we need the government to be a part of to provide real meaningful solutions? Things like national defense, things like a system of arbitrating disputes through the courts, et cetera. But where we are right now today is so far away from that. And that's why I say the behemoth of government. People know instinctively how out of control the government has become. And this is at the state level, but it's also at the federal level. They know instinctively, but they're still shocked if you dig into the details sometimes. I did a search of Michigan compiled law where I was looking for key phrases like shall not or may not, et cetera. And I think what I came up with was in all of our Michigan laws, I think I found over 30,000 instances of the government telling you what you can't do. The 10 Commandments got away with far fewer than that, right? And governed human behavior at a pretty fundamental level. Of course, they're not comprehensive, but just think how out of control the government it is when we have thousands and thousands of things that the government tells you you can or you cannot do. When you step outside your house today, it's entirely possible, it's entirely likely for most people that you'll end up being in violation of something, some edict from the government without even knowing it, because it is a behemoth at this point. And we do need to push back against that and restore a sort of government that really is operating on behalf of the people.
I mean, you obviously are committed to advocate for liberty and for the right policies that support free market solutions. defending individual rights, and obviously oppose excessive government. Now, I want to get into, because you've obviously served our great country. You are a former Green Beret, and you believe in those words that were inked on that piece of paper so much, in fact, that you went to war for it and fought for it. What made you have that switch in your head, Jonathan, where you went from your military career and you're like, you know what? I got to keep fighting for the Constitution. Like, what was it? What event made that decision for you to get into politics?
Yeah, well, there was a big gap. It wasn't a jump from there. I actually worked as an executive in the private sector for a period after I left the military. But I'm going to answer a different question first, which is how I even decided to join the military. And I'm going to give a shout out to my parents. My parents raised me to love my country, to love God, to love my family. I mean, these are gifts that it's it's indescribable how valuable they are. You don't understand it as a kid, right? So I knew from a pretty young age that I back then I thought I wanted to be a Marine. I ended up joining the Army, but I, but I wanted to serve, and I knew, and it's never going to change, that I love what America is, and I love the gifts that I've been given. Pretty humble beginning, but it really is true that you can work hard, you can make it wherever you want to go in America. But to your question about then getting involved in government, well, I was working in the private sector as a communications executive, and then during that time is when I moved back here to Michigan with my family. I've got a pretty young family. My wife, we've got 3 kids now, and we wanted to be around similar age cousins, etc. And it was partly through moving back to Michigan that I got more interested in getting involved in government because, frankly, our government here in the state of Michigan in particular is totally out of control. And they're leading the state in a way that we are doing terribly economically. We're doing terribly when you look at education outcomes, when you look at what our business community looks like, all of these things. And I was moving here from Tennessee, which is where I had landed after my last duty station was, I'm for your audience. I live right now 10 miles from where I grew up, but it was through that military experience I ended up in Tennessee. We lived there a couple of years, moved back to Michigan, and everything from watching the higher taxes here. I mean, just moving from Tennessee to Michigan, my tax bill went through the roof, right? This is crazy. But then there were a few acute things, and I think this is where one of the reasons you and I connected, and why I love some of the things you've done. So I got to experience COVID in Michigan. And that's just, it's an acute situation. It's an example through history, but it's very meaningful. The people I talk to still are passionate about understanding that time, what our government did is unacceptable. And it not only can never be allowed to happen again, but it needs to be a lesson front and center in our minds, reminding us that our government has been given too much power. When you can come and arbitrarily shut down the economy, shut down people's lives, tell people crazy things. Like you can go boating with, paddles, but not with a motor on the back of it, unless you're Governor Whitmer's husband, special access. You can go to the grocery store and you can buy certain seeds for certain types of plants, but other seeds have these things over the front of them and they won't ring you up for them. It was insane, the mandates they were putting out. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's not just about what happened. It's about the lesson we should learn from the COVID experience in the government lockdowns, the government mandates. They have been granted too much power over our lives. And we need to work, all of us, towards unwinding that and making sure, a government that can do what they did during the COVID pandemic is a government that is too big.
Yeah. This is my wheelhouse. Obviously, I'm very passionate about the pandemic and what happened. And it gives me the chills because, when you talk about those things, you relive it, and you're right. It's the amount of government and what they have over us should never be this way. And that's why, quite frankly, that I'm still in the fight. I made a vow to the state of Michigan that I would not quit until we restored the checks and balances of our state. And that is us winning in 2026. I thought with me running for governor, I was able to accomplish that. We came up short, obviously, but it's such a dire situation in the state of Michigan. You hit on some very important things, especially with your experience living in a business friendly state like Tennessee and moving back to Michigan. Taxes, energy, and the most disheartening is our kids' education. Our kids can't even read in the state of Michigan. We're at the bottom part of this union. And as you know, we grew up here, man. We know the potential what Michigan can be. We should be the powerhouse of this great nation. There's not a doubt in my mind. But unfortunately, we just haven't had the right leadership. And this is on both sides of the aisle over the decades, that's for sure. And I'm excited that we have people like you that are in the fight, that are representing. I mean, geez, oh, Pete's, Jonathan, CPAC also awarded you a 96% lifetime rating, reflecting your consistent alignment with conservative principles. I mean, that's the stuff that I think people need to know about you. And not only that, but with your military service, your experience, you obviously have a tremendous amount of depth of not only the Constitution, but how a state and a country should be run. And those are, I think, missing pieces to a lot of these so-called candidates who are trying to run for what I feel they shouldn't be running for, is the depth and the thought and the intelligence that you're bringing. I got a question about your military service. Now, when you picked the Army, did you know right off the bat that you wanted to be in the Special Forces, or did that kind of evolve?
I did know. It's the reason I ended up joining the Army. There was a special contract out there called an 18 X-ray contract, and the premises, at that time, they were allowing people to sign up to serve for really short periods of time. They needed more people to sign up. This was, the global war on terror was still pretty hot and heavy. And so getting people to sign up for a long time was a premium for the Army. And so they had a contract, the 18 X-ray contract, where to get this contract, you had to sign up for 5 years. And what it gave you was the opportunity to go to uh, infantry basic training, airborne school, and then go on to the Special Forces selection process. And if you keep passing all of the gates through the pipeline, as we call it, then you will end up putting on the green beret and the long tab and become a special forces soldier. But very few people actually make it through that. So it was sort of a recruitment tool for the Army. But that's what I ended up deciding to do is, and it was a little bit controversial at that time. I had graduated at that point from Yale University. And then when I told my parents, by the way, not only am I joining the Army, but I'm enlisting in the Army, because there was not an option to go in as an officer through this program. So I enlisted, which is pretty rare. Once you have the 4-year degree, a lot of people look at the officer school. But I enlisted. I was fortunate I made it through all of that training, and got to join um, special forces and join a team and do some cool stuff overseas.
So I always, all you Special Forces guys, you always say the same thing: cool stuff. We can only imagine. Let me go into the training. A lot of people don't understand the amount of training and the process that you have to go through with airborne and the selection process. I mean, it's grueling. It is absolutely grueling. What is one memory that you have from training, okay, that you're like, I never want to do this again? Do you ever have that moment like you're in the mud or you're in the Florida in the swamp? I mean, anything like that, you're like, I just never want to do this again?
Yeah, it's probably during the selection course, there's something called the STAR course. And the STAR course is nighttime land navigation, where you go out with a protractor and a compass. You don't have any, modern stuff. You do it at night in North Carolina in awful conditions. And overnight, what you're doing is you're navigating, a couple of clicks or a couple of kilometers at a time between specific points on a map. They give you an 8-digit MGRS grid, and you have to navigate from one to the next. If you make it to the next one, then you will get your coordinates for the following one. And they call it the STAR course because they end up being 5 points that connect, and it sometimes looks like a star on the map. But it's an overnight thing. I think all in, you end up doing about 20 to 25 kilometers of ruck marching in the dark, pitch dark, like I said, protractor and compass, and all the while you're carrying usually 70 pounds of equipment on your back. And I remember, and very few people are successful at it, by the way. You can make it through the course, you get multiple attempts, and you have to get certain number, but to complete the entire course in the night was relatively rare, especially on the first pass. And I remember getting it done, being one of the first people getting it done, and kind of like watching the dawn break. And I had taken my boots off, and I was sitting at the last star point, and I had finally set my pack down, and you cannot describe, like, I don't think I've ever been more exhausted in my life. And that was just in training, right? But
Yeah.
going that distance in the dark of night, fighting through the scrub brush, looking at a protractor and a compass, you keep your pace count in your head. For me, a lot of times I would keep the pace count and then use a little bit of trigonometry in my head to figure out where I was on the map at any given time without always having to reference it. Is that you can kind of adjust that 8-digit grid as you move and say, well, I know I've walked another 100 meters at this angle, so I can, roughly figure out where I am. But that was a pretty intense moment. It felt really good, but I also think it qualifies for your question of, it felt really good, but I don't necessarily want to ever feel it again.
Never again. Now, I noticed that there's a picture over your right shoulder there. Is that in Afghanistan and you were deployed there?
Yeah, that one I believe is Afghanistan. I'd have to turn around and look. I've got two of these. They're gifts that are traditional after you leave an ODA or an operational detachment alpha, which is what the SF teams are called. So I served on two different teams, one of them in Afghanistan and then another in two other deployments in the Middle East. And when I departed from each team, they gave me, a gift with team picture, and you can see there's a knife on it in one of the insignias. I think that one behind me is the Afghanistan one.
I mean, what better gift? Not only is it the picture, but you get a knife. I mean, that's just fantastic, right? What
Utilitarian, yeah.
That's right. What is one of the things that you've learned? Obviously, we're not going to hold it against you that you went to Yale. Okay. I'm sure you never caught any guff from any of your teammates from going to Yale. That's for sure. But what are some of the things that you think that you took from your training, from being in the special forces, and that you're applying it to your political career?
Well, the Green Berets, and there's some interesting books that people don't know much about them. It's not what people think in terms of what the operations look like, are not as much the kinetic door kicking. That's a lot more Navy SEALs or Delta Force. The Green Berets are unconventional warfare. They're problem solvers. They're warrior diplomats. They go around the world and just go into some of the craziest situations and usually link up with local partner forces. And one of the core competencies that any Green Beret has to have to be good at their job is resourcefulness and problem solving. Um, there's a joke, or maybe it's a quote from a book from Green Berets in Vietnam. Maybe it's the name of a book, but it's something like "How to Eat Soup with a Knife." And the idea is, you can't scoop it, right? But we were notorious for being in situations anywhere in the world and being given a problem set and say, here's the problem. We know what solution we want to achieve. And by the way, we don't have much by way of resources to actually help you solve this. So go figure it out. And I think politics is in a lot of ways an extension of that. It's a problem-solving exercise. It's a long-term problem-solving exercise because there are so many problems and there are problems layered on top of problems. But I think that that's the type of attitude that Green Berets have, or that they instill in everybody who works on the teams, that is productive. I mean, that's one thing that translates pretty well. There are different types of problems, but having that attitude of, throw me into the mix. We're going to find, this is what we're facing today, and it could be different tomorrow, but we're going to work out whatever solution we can.
Wow. Well said. Well said. I got to put you on the spot because I'm a fan of what you're doing. I truly am. I've told you this personally, that you are the right people that we need in the levels of office to really inspire change in our government. And quite frank, is to inspire other people and to continue to inspire. And you give us hope, Jonathan. You really do, on what's out there and what people can actually get behind. Do you have any interest of stepping up and running for the next level of your political career, like U.S. Senate, Congress, whatever that may be?
I clearly, and I think you get this, you already know this, hopefully your audience will see this. I clearly have a passion for service, and I love my country, I love my state. So I don't know what comes next. I know that I felt called to step up and run at the state level when I did in 2022. And now, I've had conversations with people in particular about this U.S. Senate seat that Gary Peters announced that he's not going to run again. We were talking earlier, the Democrats' field starting to come to light. That's certainly the type of thing I am interested in it. But, I'm not a standard politician in the sense that I want another job or that I, want a particular progression. What I want is to plug myself in the best way possible to serve the people of Michigan, potentially serve the people of the United States. And that's something that is, anybody who, I like what you were talking about before, everybody who's thinking about running for office, thank you. Because if you even have that thought, your mind's in the right place, that you need to, be involved and help be part of the solution. But the other thing you said about everybody really should do a frank analysis, and I hold myself to the standard as well. Everything from having, harmony within the family. My wife Allison and I make these decisions together. Um, Spending time in prayer. But then you got to move beyond that and talk about the reality of politics and say, you know, what is it going to take to win that seat? I think that's a critical seat, that U.S. Senate seat that's coming open. It's a critical seat. We have to send somebody out there that's going to motivate the people of Michigan, that's going to get them engaged, that's going to make them believe that if we elect a Republican there for the first time in decades, that is going to have meaningful positive impact for the people of Michigan and for the whole country. So, I don't spend time, sitting around just thinking about the political future for me.
Yeah.
But in this short window, since we heard that announcement, that is one of those areas where I've spent a lot of time in discussion and talked with a lot of key individuals who might be interested in that, but also heard from a lot of people that are part of that grassroots movement saying, is this the time? And we will see.
Yeah, one of the famous quotes that I always love to hear is, "You want to make God laugh, you tell him your plans." And he laughs at me, and I'm sure he laughs at everyone else all the time. But we all have a purpose on this path, and man, I good luck on that decision, on whatever you do decide to do. That's for sure. But my goodness gracious, it's always a breath of fresh air when I get to speak to the level of person that you are, the family man. And for those of you who don't know Jonathan, his family's absolutely beautiful, great family. Um, Look him up. That's for sure. What's your website, Jonathan?
So people can still check me out at we need a warrior.com. Was my, and it mostly directs from my campaign website for running for state senate. But on the official side, you can also go to senatorjonathanlindsey.com. And that's where you'll see more of the stuff that comes out from my office, statements that we put out, legislation that I've worked on, et cetera. And then you can also just Google Jonathan Lindsey or Senator Jonathan Lindsey on Facebook and on X, and you can follow along there.
And obviously, there is a link on those websites to donate to your campaign, right? Are you guys always in active fundraising mode?
We are always in active fundraising mode on the first one. That's why I mentioned, if you go to we need a warrior.com, that still has a donate link on there. Obviously, the official government one would not.
Yeah.
But and if you end up landing on Facebook, it'll link back to that as well.
Well, here's what I'm going to put out for you. I am a big fan of this. Everyone that's watching, go buy Senator Jonathan Lindsey a cup of coffee. That's what I say. Go donate $5, $10, $20 if you can. If you want to take him out to a nice fancy dinner, throw in $50, because obviously this man has not only sacrificed and served our great country, but he continues to fight for all of us in the political arena, which I tend to think I have never had any experience in battle, but it's pretty nasty in the political arena. Not life and death, obviously, but it is nasty. So buy this gentleman a cup of coffee or some dinner if you can, to support him, because my goodness gracious, this is the caliber of person that we need fighting for all of us and our families. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, your knowledge, your service, brother. Thank you so much for serving our country and what you continue to do, man.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for that especially kind call to action at the end. And, knowing what your audience is and the kind of people who follow you, if I can, just the last thing I'd like to say to everyone is, no matter where politics goes, I think the biggest challenge ahead of us is we've got to continue the work of expanding who it is we're talking to about what we believe in. So you really did have a grassroots army behind you through your race. They've continued, a lot of people have stayed so engaged with what you're doing, the way you're communicating about politics. But the Achilles heel we're always going to have is that it's so much easier to stay in conversation with the people we already know. Maybe you build the bubble out. Maybe you're involved in your county party and you've brought in some new people, but now you feel like the job is done. The job is not done, especially here in Michigan. We need to be reaching out into our communities, talking to people who are not engaged in politics, people who have maybe given up. A lot of those people we call low propensity voters, I knock a lot of their doors. They don't care about America any less than you or I do. The reason they don't vote is that because they don't believe they don't believe it matters. We need to connect with people in our community. We need to continue to take a movement of super motivated people, a lot of them been cultivated by watching you, watching others, and take them and continue to build that out into communities and go to those doors, go to those places where people are not as motivated as we are right now, and convince them with credible ideas, candidates, political results, and tell them there is hope on the horizon. There is a reason to be involved, and we need you. So I hope that's something that people will continue to do.
I think after hearing what you had to say today, that's exactly what you did, is you inspired a lot of hope, and me. I mean, because when you're in this thing, you tend to start to question things, and like, goodness gracious, are we on the right path? What do we need to do? And I'm so thankful for your time today, because I know everyone that's watching, that will continue to watch this as I cut up this video and post, that's exactly what you're going to be doing, man, is you're going to be inspiring a lot of people and a lot of hope. And I said this time and time again, the power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do, an interview that you may bring to the table that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. It's very powerful. Thank you again for your time. And
Thank you, Garrett.
Tell your family I said hello.
I will.
All right, brother. Have a
Thanks
great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Wow. That's all I can say about that gentleman. He does, by the way, have a beautiful, beautiful family. Allison, his wife, is super supportive, great patriot. Their entire family is awesome. They have a beautiful barn over, I think, in Branch County, where they hold events. I've spoken there on a couple of occasions. Absolutely gorgeous. Just good folk. That's what they are. Just good, solid folks. And those are the people that I like bringing on. Those are the people I like talking to, because they bring so much to the equation. And just listening to the depth that he has on issues and what he's done for our country, that holds a lot of weight for me, or with me, and I hope it does to you. So we need a warrior.com. Let me make sure. I'm going to post that in the description once I upload this, but I just want to make sure that I have the right address. I'm going to type it in right here. We need a warrior.com. See if it comes up, and if it does, yep. Type in, and his beautiful family will be right there, Jonathan Lindsey. So we need a warrior.com. folks, I urge you, if you like what he had to say today, buy the man a cup of coffee, $5, right? If you want to buy him dinner, you want to buy his entire family dinner, then you can throw in a Benjamin. It's totally up to you. But please donate some money to his fight, because we need quality candidates like that. See how I call him a quality candidate? Like, I'm already saying that hopefully he may run for U.S. Senate. That's somebody that can get the base fired up. That is for sure. And I love talking about his military experience, because to be in the Special Forces as a Green Beret at all levels, but especially being a Green Beret, is something special. And to have that caliber of person representing us in the state of Michigan, man, unbelievable, very humbling. This is great. So on Tuesday, I have a very important interview that is going to be coming up. This guy has been fighting the court systems with his son, who his ex-wife is trying to reassign his gender. She has picked up their 2 kids and I think moved them to California. This guy continues to fight. He refuses to pay, I think he said, the medical child support, where I think they're trying to get him that he has to pay for his son's transitional surgery. And he refuses, which rightfully so. But this guy's been fighting since 2017. We couldn't get him on because of the storms that we had come through. I didn't have internet signal, but he will be coming on Tuesday. And I'm looking forward to that interview. I literally told the gentleman that he can have as long as he wants on my platform, even if the interview is 3 hours. It's going to be live. I'm just going to let him tell the entire story, because quite frankly, folks, when I watched several of his interviews, I wanted to throw up. I can't believe that this is happening in our country, in America, and what these court systems can do to people. It's mind-boggling. So I want to put the right energy into this, make it right, and get the awareness out for all of you, because my role in this is to continue to bring you up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information. And I will continue to do that to the best of my ability. So God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan, of course, and always. God bless these United States. Until next time.